Well, hello, Convention of States supporters, and welcome back to another edition of Facebook Live. My name is Andrew Woodruff. I'll be your host for this episode, and of course, I'm joined by Rita Peters, who is back from her family adventures. Rita, how are you?
I'm great. I'm happy to be back. I always miss being part of the show when I'm out of town, so glad to be back.
We're glad to have you back, but family always comes first, so it was great to be cheering. Garrett and I were cheering on the side for your daughter, but of course, now we get to talk about the Fauci emails that dropped last week. I'm excited to talk about that with you and how bureaucrats think they know how to govern our lives, but then they don't apply those rules to themselves. We'll get to that in just a few minutes. The media claimed that the COS resolution was dead in Nebraska, but an amazing turn of events happened and the COS resolution was revived. We're going to get the inside scoop with one of our on-the-ground volunteers in just a few moments. But before we get to that, we're going to talk about flip-flop Fauci. He's at it again. If we didn't need more evidence that Dr. Anthony Fauci was lying to us for our own good, new reports this week broke that reveal that he doesn't think masks are effective for asymptomatic people. Masks, in one email he writes, masks are really for infected people to prevent them from spreading infection to people who are not infected, rather than protecting uninfected people from acquiring the infection, Fauci wrote. I was reliably told that masks are more important than the vaccine. I'm pretty sure that was Dr. Robert Redfield who said that. I could be wrong, but that's sticking in my mind for some reason. Another email that he wrote says, the typical mask you buy in the drugstore is not really effective in keeping out the virus, which is small enough to pass through material. It might, however, provide some slight benefit, out gross droplets if someone coughs on you. Again, the media and people like Dr. Anthony Fauci were saying something completely different to the American people than what is being expressed in these emails. It's very suspect to me. There's one final email that we want to touch on that is really important. It just shows the hypocrisy. He says, I do not recommend that you wear a mask, particularly since you are going to a very low-risk location. He said this to Sylvia Burwell, who is a bureaucrat working for Health and Human Services from 2014 to 2017. So what this email shows is that it's fine for bureaucrats to avoid the rules and regulations of the mask mandates and everything like that, because the American people, they're not able to make these decisions on their own. The idiom rules for thee, but not for me is really sticking in my mind right now. And me applies to the entire bureaucracy in the eyes of Dr. Anthony Fauci. And there was one final email where he basically admits that symptomatic people are the chief vectors of the virus, not asymptomatic. So symptomatic people are infecting healthy people. Asymptomatic people are not infecting healthy people. So it just shows that the masks are just ineffective and that they really didn't serve any purpose except for increasing the power of the bureaucracy. Rita, as a constitutional attorney, what do you make of all of this news?
Well, I just have to say it's so disturbing to see how these federal bureaucrats aren't committing to simply providing the best, most accurate scientific information. No, they're committed to controlling the behavior of the American people. They're committed to doing what's best to us, even if that means lying to us to get us to do what they think we should do. And they're committed to expanding their power and influence over our daily lives. We know it was never meant to be this way, right? And we can't let them continue using COVID-19 to increase their power. They've already rammed through massive federal spending, prohibited landowners from evicting tenants, and threatened to impose a nationwide vaccine passport system. Now, there is a way we can reverse their expansion of power, but we can't rely on Congress to do it. Congress will never limit its own power. We have to turn to the people and the states, and our most powerful tool is in Article 5, Convention of States. A convention of states is called and controlled by the states and has the power to propose constitutional amendments. These amendments can limit the power, scope, and jurisdiction of the federal government, including bureaucracies like the CDC, NIH, and the NIAID. bureaucrats like Dr. Fauci won't willingly give up their power. We know that. We have to take it from them. And we can do that with Article 5, using the states to balance and return the proper balance of power between the states and the federal government. So we need you watching to sign the petition and join the movement.
And those petitions, they are so important. They make all the difference. And we could see, for example, last week, what happened in Nebraska, where we were stuck in committee in Nebraska for years. And a little over a month ago, Steve Halloran, who is our chief sponsor, attempted to pull our resolution out of committee. And unfortunately, that motion failed. But the COS volunteers, they didn't accept that defeat. They didn't say, we're just going to cower away. They continued to press into liberty, and they were undeterred. And they worked with Senator Halloran and Senator Mike Flood to revive the COS resolution in Nebraska. And Senator Mike Flood, just days before the legislative session ended, he motioned to suspend the rules to put the Convention of States resolution back in its original committee. And that vote, it passed 30-14, which revived our Article 5 resolution. And then later on that evening, the Committee on Government, Veterans, and Military Affairs voted 5-3 to pass the COS resolution out of the committee. And then it goes to the floor. It'll be going to the floor next year, which is an amazing turn of events. And it just shows you the dedication of our grassroots supporters, our volunteers, and the power of signing the petition and supporting our grassroots movement. So to talk more about this amazing stuff we saw last week, we are bringing one of our COS peers in Nebraska. He is a volunteer call captain with the Nebraska team, Steve Jessen. Steve, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm doing really good.
Well, it's certainly a pleasure to bring you on. We want to get all of the information about what happened last week. So let's jump right into that. One legislator called it historic, what you and the Nebraska team did last week. Because a month ago, one newspaper reported that the COS resolution was dead in Nebraska. But you and many of the volunteers said, hold on one second, we're not done here. So you worked diligently and you were able to turn the tide and change things up. So tell us about how the Nebraska team was able to go from dead in the water to reviving the COS resolution in Nebraska.
Well, I guess from the beginning, once the COS really wasn't dead, it was a motion it was a poll motion in state of Nebraska. They couldn't get it out of the committee, so the motion is what failed. However, the media reported as such and everything. And so what had happened is our senator in this district came to a meeting and seen all the people that we had that were involved. And so anyway, and he was also a past speaker of the legislature here. And so the motion is what had failed, and it was a motion to pull it out of committee without it being voted out, and that's what failed. And so right away, there were several senators that were supposed to have been there to pass it or help pass it, but they ended up leaving before the vote. So consequently failed. So immediately our senator, Mike Flood, knowing what happened, filed a motion to suspend the rules, because under Nebraska legislation, once that happened, that motion to pull it failed, it went into an indefinite file and was considered dead. Well, the motion that our senator presented that day before he left on that day to vote, he found a motion and he found it in the rules that he could suspend the rules and put the legislation back into committee, because we were trying to pull it out. We did pull it out, but it failed. So all that being said, so anyway, we'd been meeting, and I told him we had a meeting on that Saturday after that vote, And I told Mike, I says, Mike, I don't know what I'm going to tell him, because he actually did not vote at all for that motion. And so he was on a little bit of hot water. and so he ended up coming to our meeting on that Saturday, and he stood up and he took the heat and basically said, why he didn't and what the plan was, and it was a plan that failed. But he did file that motion, and from there we took it from there. We started campaigning with the legislatures, me and our district captain and our state captain, and our one of the other district captains in our deal. We started going to Lincoln, and we started visiting with legislators there. Basically, my senator told me that we needed to do what we did, and that is get people in front of our state legislators. And that's what we did. And we were emailing, we were sending in phone calls and everything. And they know who we are down there. They were overwhelmed with the number of people that were responding to that situation. So we started asking them to pass his motion to suspend the rules and put us back. In the meantime, our Mike had went to one of the committee members and holding it up that was voting against it and not letting it come out of committee. And he went to him and talked to him and made some kind of a deal. But the guy agreed that if we could get that motion passed, that he would vote to bring it out of committee the rest. And so that's kind of that's it in a nutshell, is that we just didn't take no for an answer. And thanks to Senator Halloran and Senator Flood, they helped us navigate through that and that type of stuff. We were supposed to actually have the vote on a Friday. And so me and another two guys went down to the state legislature, and we canvassed all of the senators. There was 33 of them on the whip list that were supposedly going to vote for this motion, and visited every one of their offices and spent some time with their staff. They were in legislation, so we really didn't get to the senators themselves, but we had drafted up a letter and talked to their staff, and then it got postponed. There was a little bickering going on in the legislature, and everybody had enough on a Friday, and so they canceled, or a bunch of them walked out, so they canceled the vote for that day and reconvened on Wednesday. Let me tell you, it was a nail biter the whole time.
Well, Steve, it was a nail biter for us as well. And I want to thank you for you and your team showing the rest of the country and grassroots supporters everywhere how they really can have an impact and make a difference. And just, the refusal to be finished and just go away quietly into the night is really what we saw here. And it was incredible. I'd like to ask you to say a few more words about Senator Flood and Senator Halloran. I know that their support was crucial to this, and so just want to ask you to comment on how important that was and how they became such great champions for the movement.
Well, Senator Halloran has been actually the one that has sponsored this legislation. He has made this a priority legislation, and he has been doing that for the last several years. So he's been on board for with the Convention of States. He's actually received award from the Convention of States for being a supporter. But Senator Flood wasn't, and he's new to this legislature again. He's been in the legislature before, but he came back in, and this is actually his first year back after an 8-year leave from that. And I invited him to the meeting, and Senator Halloran was there too. So So Mike came in and walked into our meeting, and we had a packed house. We had a standing room only, and we overwhelmed him. And he made comments at that meeting after listening to our presentation and everything. And from that point on, he was on board. Once he knew what it was about, and knew it wasn't just a piece of a wish list or a special interest group that's trying to promote something. We sold him. And so that's exactly what's happened with him. And he is, and yep.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a great senator.
That tends to be the case. People, you explain what Convention of States is trying to achieve, and we present all of the solutions, and people eventually come around to see that we are indeed a solution as big as the problem that is presented within the federal government. I want to ask you, in my next question, what's going to be next for this COS resolution in Nebraska? Can we expect a debate sometime next year?
Well, because of the motion that passed, what happened is like I said, Senator Flood had made a deal with one of the senators in the committee. So this happened on the second day to the end of the legislature. So what ended up happening was that day, as soon as it was the last piece on their agenda that day, and so it was done. Within 5 minutes, Mike called me and I says, okay, so now it's back in committee. When's the committee going to meet? He says they're meeting. And so the senator did vote to bring it out of committee. So we had a 5-3 vote to bring it out. And now it's sitting in general file, which our legislature starts in January, and it's ready to go to be debated in January. We'll start that process. So we are out of committee and we're in the legislature. And so we'll have 3 sessions, 3 times we have to go through the debate process, and once they pass, then we're done. We're in.
That's awesome. And I know, knowing you and your team, that you're not going to take a vacation between now and January, but that you are going to stay in contact with these legislators and continue working to encourage them to be bold and to take this stand on behalf of the people of your state and on behalf of our republic. Now, Steve, that our application calls for a convention to propose amendments on 3 topics: imposing fiscal restraint on Washington, limiting its power and jurisdiction, and setting term limits for federal officials. So I'm curious, do you have a particular type of amendment proposal on one of those topics that is your favorite, that you would most like to see passed?
Well, I have been saying since for many years, I'm going to give you away my age a little bit, but term limits are, I've felt since I was in my 20s that term limits was something that needed to happen. I feel that that's one of the biggest things that can happen. I think career politicians creates career, fraud and corruption, period. Too much power. So term limits is probably my number 1 thing. That, and the second would be the limits of overreach. Our federal government is passing legislation that people have to live by, but they don't pass. They exclude themselves from that, and I've said that for many years. That you get rid of those 2, or put those things in place, and a lot of problems will go away because we ain't occurring corrupt.
Mm-hmm. And Steve, whenever we bring a COS volunteer onto this program, we like to just get a little bit of their story. So if you wouldn't mind, could you share with the audience your COS story? How did you hear about Convention of States? And why did you decide that you were going to invest your time and your resources as a volunteer for the organization?
Okay, so I had a friend of mine that had sent me a COS the guide, digital guide, on a text message, and I seen it and I looked at it, and then a couple weeks when I never opened it up, but I seen it, and then he called me a couple weeks later and said, "Hey, did you get a chance to look at that?" And I says, "No, but I will," and I did it right after I got off with him, and I went through the COS stuff and the pocket guide information, and that was it. This is what I knew there was a way of doing this. I just never knew that it was what it was, and I didn't know that there was some doing it. So I called Rich up and I says, "This is it. We got to get it. We got to do it." And so I started planning on calling some people together. I sent that link to every contact I had in my phone book, on my book. And we got a meeting started, put together, and everything. And then all of a sudden, of course, I signed the petition. And the next thing I know, our district captain had contacted me. And I'm like, really? There is somebody here? And needless to say, one thing led to another. And we had a meeting. We had 20 people show up for that. And we came up with a game plan to go out and try to tell everybody that we knew about this, and we scheduled meetings every month. We set a day, last Friday of every month at that time, and we started meeting every month. And the second meeting we had like 300 people show up to our, and so that this is what it's all about is restoring the republic. Period. And we got to make those changes. So that's how we did it. That's how why I'm enthused. I'm telling you, it's the only way of saving country without bearing arms, is the way I look at it. So all this talk.
Well, Steve, for our viewers who are watching from Nebraska, tell them what they can do right now to make a difference.
Okay. Well, the number one thing is to make sure that they stay in contact with their legislators. Even though they're in recess, they still are receiving, they have staff there that receives their information, so they are available. And then we need to, we're going to start going to work. We have a meeting on Thursday at the Norfolk Public Library again, and Ernie and a bunch of the people from our state will be there. And it's a planning meeting, and we're hoping that we can have a bunch of people show up there for that. We're going to have a plan on how to, we have some senators that we need to have a conversation with so that we can get them to understand what we're trying to accomplish. So we got a lot of things. We're going to have a parade on the 4th of July, and I think we're anticipating throughout the state several people from out of town, out of our district, from Lynn, Omaha, and around the state to help join us. We're hoping to have 200-300 people marching in the parade, COS shirts on. So we're going to make sure that the people, just basically we got to stay in front of the senators. Once they get to decide this, we have to stay in front of the senators. They have to know that we're all, we're all for it. You can't hide and expect them to read your mind.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
That's right. What a great call to action. Keep in contact with your legislators. Make sure to participate in the COS events that are coming up, and don't give up ever. That is just an awesome call to action. Thank you so much, Steve, for coming on, giving us some of your time, talking about the amazing victory that was secured by you and the COS volunteers, and of course the legislative champions there in Nebraska. It's just such a pleasure to get the inside scoop on what happened. Thank you so much, Steve.
Yeah, well, I say one thing, that the victory was God's victory. I firmly believe that. I'm just telling you, it wasn't us. It was God is working through our team. I can assure you of that.
He always is. We hope to have you on again, Steve, when Nebraska gets going again, and when the COS resolution gets debated on the floor. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and sign off, Rita. We've had a jam-packed episode, but we have to get back to work, so let's go ahead and sign off. Here's the situation in America right now. There are career politicians who spend way too much time in Washington. They spend way too much of your money, and they're too comfortable with asserting power in your lives. This is not how a republic is supposed to run. This is not a government run by we the people. I know it seems dire right now, but there is a solution. And the great news is that solution is within the Constitution. We are attempting to use the Constitution to save the Constitution. Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution empowers we the people to call a convention of states where the states can get together to propose amendments such as fiscal restraints, term limits, and putting restrictions on the federal government. Once and for all, we can force career politicians out of the DC swamp. We can force politicians to spend our money wisely. And then we can also put ironclad restrictions on the federal government. We could throw away that key and we could walk away smiling, knowing that the federal government is back in the constitutional box it was supposed to be in. The movement is well underway. 15 states have already passed the COS resolution. We need to get to 34 states. Once we get to 34 states, that triggers a convention and we will be able to change DC forever. Rita, please tell our volunteers or our viewers how they can go to social media to find us.
Yeah, don't forget to follow us on social media. That's Rumble, MeWe, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Parler, and Instagram. We also have new American-made apparel at conventionofstates.com/store. Check it out. Do some Father's Day shopping. And check out the Battle Cry with COS President Mark Meckler Sunday nights at 8:00 p.m. Eastern Time. And we'll see you back here next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time for another edition of COS Live. Right now, it's time for you and me to get back to work because we have a country to save. And remember, if you're looking for the person who's going to restore the republic, look in a mirror. Thanks for watching.